Do you have any East Africans here? So, East Africans, let's give them a round of applause. Any West Africans? They run this place, don't they not? This is Ghana, so it's full of West Africans. Any South Africans? Where are the South Africans? Oh, well, not really. Any North Africans? North Africa is represented as well. Let's go, let's give each other a round of applause. Let's get started with this conversation. It's an important discussion, this one. Extremely important because we're talking about how to prepare ourselves for conditions that are changing. It's important that we understand that the world is changing, that we need money in order to ensure that we are ready for those changes. And we're going to have a very honest, open, and robust conversation that will hopefully lead us to learning from across the continent, learning from each other. This session is called Supporting Climate Resilience in African Food, Agri-food Systems, Building Resilient Rural Economies for a Food Secure and Prosperous Africa. Now, to get us started, I'd like us to give a round of applause to someone who has done literally everything to be here with us today. Plan B was for us to host him virtually, but somehow he managed to make it. And but before I bring Andy on board, I just want you to watch a very quick clip, a quick video. Just take a look at this video that introduces what we're going to discuss here. Have a look at it.
Our continent reports the lowest productivity and farm incomes in the world. While the world's investments in agriculture over the past 50 years have resulted in improved, more nutritious and climate-proof agriculture, unfortunately, many African farmers do not have access to these technologies nor the know-how to use them effectively. Agriculture, forestry and other land uses contribute to 65% of the African continent's greenhouse gas emissions. Are we doing enough to change our agriculture in order to reduce environmental impacts while increasing productivity? Let's gather to discuss the main challenges and strategic actions to be taken to accelerate Africa's food security, to build resilience for improved livelihoods and job creation. Let's think of climate-smart agriculture and agroecology technologies. Let's make sure no solution is left unaddressed. Together, let's support climate resilience in African agri-food systems to build resilient rural economies for a food-secure and prosperous Africa.
And that pretty much sums up our discussion today. And to get us started, I'd like to invite Dr. Andy Jarvis, Director, Decision and Policy Analysis Area at the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. Andy, welcome. Andy did literally everything to be with us today, so he deserves a louder round of applause.
Absolute pleasure to be here. It was a little bit of an ordeal, but I made it. And so I've been asked to set the scene on this topic. To be honest, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. I don't know, which one would you prefer first? I like to go normally with the bad so that we end on the good, right? So, I mean, the bad news is that we have a climate crisis, and it is the crisis of the 21st century. It compounds it compounds so many things together, and it impacts on every person, on humans, on the planet, biodiversity, environment. It is just an amplifier of negative impacts with climate change. And so we have a huge challenge on our hands. And it gets worse. Africa, no matter which report you read, you're going to read that Africa is the most vulnerable, the hardest hit. And it's for a variety of reasons. And when you go into Africa and you see the hardest hit, the sector that is going to be most hardest hit as well is agriculture and food. And it's really because farmers are on the front line. They're the ones every second of every day really living, breathing, literally, climate impacts. And so it's an area that needs significant, serious attention. Something that's telling. If you look over the last 25 years, we celebrate 25 years of increase in agricultural productivity across the continent. And there were just 2 years in those 25 years where actually there was a decline. And those 2 years were 2 years that happened to be El Nino years as well. And so it just brings the point of how sensitive agriculture, our food systems are to climate. And you can go anywhere across the continent right now and you'll see somewhere on the news there's a flood there, there's a drought here, there's a heat wave over there. And so, you know, we see significant impacts happening today. And it's a real clear and present danger of undoing so many of the great things that we've been seeing, at least I've seen today, this afternoon. Many of much of the progress that has been made, this is a threat to pull it back, to undo some of the good that has been achieved over the years. So, you know, you have floods and droughts and problems today of climate variability and extremes. And then we have projections through the future that without significant climate action, mitigation goals, Paris Agreement being achieved, will have also long-term effects that will significantly challenge our ability to produce food, our ability to deliver food security. So that's the bad news. It's pretty bleak, the horizon in that sense. But the good thing is now we move to the good news. You know, we have been now looking systematically at this issue for 2 decades, really rising up to the challenge. And there are a number of elements and solutions that are there on the horizon, and plenty to celebrate in terms of progress. So I'll give you 3 key elements, key learnings that we can use to set the scene on this and build off in the discussion. So one of the things is that many of the most important adaptation options that are on the table, things that we can do right now to adapt and to build resilience, happen to also be just good development practice. And so, you know, there's plenty of synergy there. We don't need to have a complete change of course. We just need to double down and bring in this kind of concept of climate smart, bring in climate a little bit more into the forefront in terms of thinking about what you do and how you prioritize. And so it's about getting technologies out there. It's about building the infrastructure for farmers and rural communities to be food secure. It's about improving practices. All of these things give them resilience, basically, at household level and also at community level. We have a great example, and I'm sure this will come out later today in this session, is from the TAT project, Technologies for African Transformation. So there it's 75 technologies that have now been outscaled, working with national systems, putting these into farmers' hands in over 24 countries. Many of these technologies, if not all of them, have a climate resilient component in them. It could be drought-resistant varieties. It could be improved practices that improve the soil, generate greater soil retention of water in the soil, and bring about more resilience to climate impacts. So that's the first one, is good development practice is generally climate smart. We just need to bolster that climate component in what we do. Second one is bundling, is threading the needle between options, is putting things together, building up much more coherent strategies to spur on food security and rural development. So it's about the technologies, putting in the hands of farmers improved varieties, putting in the hands of their improved practices and the knowledge to do that. It's also about the programs, and we need to be bundling those technologies and providing safety nets, index-based insurance, safety nets in case there is an extreme drought and we don't lose those gains that we have. In terms of policies, it can be programs, investment that is just supporting there. So technologies, programs, and the other is services. It's the knowledge piece, right? And so we need to be ensuring that farmers are getting access to not only those technologies, here's the technology, but accompaniment through the process of adoption. And so it's digital services, absolute revolution. It's incredible what is happening in Africa in agriculture with digital services. And so you need to be bundling those into anything that we do. And climate forecasts. We're at the stage now where climate science can deliver seasonal forecasts, help farmers know what's coming and prepare for it, and change their management and react to the threats that are coming. And so for a farmer, what they need to see is not just the technologies and the options, but they need to see the finance to be able to make that change, and the safety net so that they feel secure doing that, and the knowledge systems that deliver it. So that's the second element, bundling, putting things together. And I think that's still good development practice, but we need to really work on portfolios of options for farmers. And then the third element is that you can be competitive of this change as a result. And so, Africa is, you look at the statistics, Africa is not a driver of global climate change. It hasn't been over the centuries, nor is it right now. It's a tiny drop in the ocean in terms of global emissions. But so many of the things that need to happen right now to adapt can also be done in a way that puts Africa in comparative advantage, competitive advantage, as being a sustainable producer of food and agriculture in Africa. There's the opportunity to not make the same mistakes that have been made in the past in developed countries, and take a new trajectory, and a trajectory that is low emissions, that is sustainable. So examples, let me just throw two examples. If you're installing irrigation today, don't do it with diesel pumps. Don't be installing all of this technology that requires fossil fuels to drive it. Solar-powered irrigation, you are immediately making a huge step forward into the 21st century with technologies that are clean, green, and productive. Fertilizers, another one. So right now, right now, especially with the crisis in Ukraine, you have fertilizers through the roof, the prices, imported from Northern Europe, moving to here, countries spending very little, limited foreign exchange to buy imported goods, fertilizers. There's got to be a better way. And so this is another example where Africa can be looking at circular economies, using residues, using waste, reusing it and putting it into fertilizers that will be cleaner, more sustainable, more productive, and show the way about how we can actually produce food in the 21st century and show developed countries how to do it. And I think there's a real opportunity there. You can cut corners, learn from mistakes, and be highly competitive also by bringing that sustainable element into the strategies moving forward. So those are the three elements. It's about good development practice, it's about bundling services, programs, technologies, and it's about taking on a new pathway towards development that is more sustainable right from the start. So I hope I've set the scene there. Pleasure. Many thanks for the invitation to talk, and I wish you all the best in the panel now discussion.
Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. We're pressed for time. I'd like to hear from Ethiopia in a moment. I don't know what your time looks like and what your availability looks like. I might have to make a few changes to the flow shortly. Bear with me if that happens. In the meantime, though, Kola Masha, managing partner of Baban Guna, will help us get this conversation started.
Since 1997, researchers at University of Sussex have monitored global trends in armed conflict. Their research clearly shows that the number of armed conflicts in Africa has grown 7-fold in 10 short years, from 2006 to 2017. Let's think about that. 7-fold in a single decade. Why is this? We believe as oxygen is to fire, so are unemployed youth to insecurity. And there are a lot of unemployed youth on this continent. In Nigeria alone, conservatively, a wave of 20 million youth entering an oversaturated labor force in 20 years from 1991 to 2010 caused youth unemployment to skyrocket, triggering not one, not two, but three insurgencies. Today, with a median age of 18, half of Nigeria's population, more than 18 million people, approximately the population of Germany, the fourth largest economy on the planet, are under the age of 18 and will be entering the workforce in the next 20 years, from 2010 to 2030. My friends, if a wave of 20 million youth triggered the Niger Delta militancy, the herdsman crisis, and Boko Haram, I ask you, what will 4 times that number do? To do my part to solve this challenge, in 2012, I moved to a tiny village in northern Nigeria, to the center of the areas most recently impacted by the spread of insurgencies, brutal bombings, and searing poverty, with an idea. If we make farming much more profitable, using bundling services like the previous speaker talked about, could we disrupt the downward spiral of poverty and violence and create opportunities for dignified and fulfilling work for the very demographic most at risk of being led astray, the rural youth? Over the last decade, with a passionate and committed team, coupled with the help of our many, many, many partners, we have grown dramatically. Today, we've become the largest corn-producing entity in Africa, this season farming nearly 170,000 acres of corn using highly sustainable methods, cumulatively supporting nearly 300,000 farmers over the last 10 years with $200 million in financing, enabling them to achieve net incomes of more than double the national average. By providing a holistic bundled package of training, credit, agro inputs, storage, and marketing services. As we make our members' farmers wealthier, we are also very focused on ensuring they are adequately adapted to climate change while ensuring we do our part to mitigate the impact of climate change. Agriculture is extremely vulnerable to climate change, as alluded earlier, and its negative impacts are felt in the form of reduced yields and more frequent extreme weather shocks, affecting crops and livestock alike. Farmers in Nigeria, with no viable means to increase their yields, often engage in unsustainable agricultural practices, such as crop burning, that increase the effects of climate change. As a result, Babangona has made climate-smart agriculture a core focus of our intervention. Our efforts are centered around climate change mitigation initiatives and building farmers' resilience to climate change-related shocks. Our climate change mitigation initiatives include reduced deforestation to improve the absorption of carbon, reduced crop burning to reduce carbon emissions, optimized agro input use to reduce carbon emissions by reducing the amount of fertilizer farmers use. In addition, we have piloted a model to enable farmers access large amounts of organic fertilizer to reduce the long-term use of inorganic fertilizers, further reducing the farmers' carbon footprint. In addition, we've piloted a program to incentivize farmers to return their crop residue back into the soil in an effort to increase soil organic carbon storage. We are looking for partners to enable us to scale up both of these high-impact programs. Finally, over the last several years, Babangona has provided a unique hermetic storage solution to preserve the quality of our members' farmer grains post-harvest, reducing food losses dramatically. Food loss is a critical driver to climate change as it creates inefficiencies in supply chain that cause needless hectares of land to be farmed and for the produce to be transported, producing unnecessary carbon emissions. To build our members' resilience to climate change-related shocks, we have implemented innovative solutions to increase their productivity and profitability, developed innovative insurance systems, not one, not two, but 3 types of innovative insurance. We trained them on practices such as crop rotation and provided them improved technologies such as drought-tolerant seeds. In closing, let me urge the members of the audience who work with financial institutions that the risks you see in financing smallholder farmers can be mitigated. We, using a tremendous amount of technology as highlighted by the first speaker, we have achieved a repayment rate over 99% over the last 11 years by leveraging such advanced technologies that include the development of powerful artificial intelligence algorithms to monitor farms. We've been able to accomplish this by building the single largest technology organization dedicated to smallholder farmers on the continent. And with all of this, I think with the continued support of our many, many partners, we can continue to scale the impact of our work to impact 1 million farmers by 2025. Thank you.
And it's good to see that there are initiatives that think about the small farmer. Now, I want to invite at this point for a very brief conversation because she has to leave soon. The Honorable Semereta Sewasel, who is the State Minister for Finance and Economic Cooperation from Ethiopia. Please, if you may come. And the one thing that, let's give a round of applause as she comes up. Ethiopia is doing a lot of good work towards food security, and I'm very curious, and hopefully she'll be able to answer this question for us. What are the lessons to be learned from Ethiopia? Because in 3 years' time, the expectation is Ethiopia will be one of the biggest wheat producers in the world, in Africa. So how have you managed to change that? How have you managed to set yourselves up to be in such a prime position? I'm really looking forward to hearing that.
Is mainly known for our food security challenge, and it's very rare that you get to hear about the incredible story that we're doing as a result of the support that we've received from AFDB. So what we've had is the TAT program has come into Ethiopia and has helped us to develop heat-tolerant seeds, which we've now been able to plant in lowland areas of the country. Now, traditionally, wheat production mainly happens in the highlands, so it is through research that we were able to develop that we have now planted vast areas which we've used irrigation to produce largest amounts of wheat production. I'm very happy to inform you that Ethiopia has now, because of this program, increased its coverage over 600,000 metric hectares of land have been farmed, and this is a big success story that we have. Again, the involvement of the private sector is another thing that comes into board. Because of the private sector involvement, we were able to expand the distribution of the heat-tolerant seeds. The involvement of farmers themselves, the Ministry of Agriculture being in charge of the program, and also research centers being highly motivated and encouraged to use this has yielded several and very encouraging results. So we're very grateful for this program. This is a direction that the government is taking. We will be pursuing more irrigation to ensure the wheat productivity increase.
Right.
Yes.
And to support your ambition, you need money.
Absolutely. So this is where we once again come back to the bank. This is a successful model. Ethiopia has potentials that can, and we keep saying we are the food basket of Africa, although it doesn't look like it. So we have a lot of land that has not been farmed. We have lots of waters that we can tap into. So with the right support, I think Ethiopia is in a position to expand and really provide not only for itself food sufficiency, but also to other countries in the region.
So the way the world is playing at the moment, every country has a whole list of priorities. And in most cases, everything is an emergency. You need money because of the COVID problems. You need money because Ukraine suddenly is a target of, we know about what's going on there. So the question to me, what I'm toying with at the moment is how you're able to prioritize, because there'll be people here saying that, we don't have money to do the things that you're trying to do. How, as Minister in charge of Finance, how are you managing to collaborate and to make sure that the resources that are required internally are made available?
That's a very interesting question, because for us as a government and as a country, we prioritize primarily making sure that everybody has food to eat and ensuring that people are secure within this setting. This means, not only providing humanitarian assistance when the challenge occurs, but making sure we have a sustainable model that will carry us past the challenge that we have. In fact, the challenge that we face today more than ever emphasized that we should be prioritizing such programs. So again, it's the challenge is with the scarcity of resources, But this is the right direction to head. We cannot go back to the world again and again and request for assistance. This is the path that we should be heading, and this is where our partners should be supporting us.
And one last question. If there's somebody who's interested in putting some money into Ethiopia, it could be a potential development partner, what are you saying to them? You know, why Ethiopia and why should they write that check?
We have a system that's proven to be effective, and this is seen in the results that we are achieving. Ethiopia is consistently has set out a priority. We are clear which path we are heading towards, and most of our partners see eye to eye in this. This is why we say we are a reliable partner producing results, and we need all the support that we can manage.
Let's give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. She needs to go for another meeting, and she's graciously decided to stay with us so that we can learn those lessons from Ethiopia. Another round of applause would be in order. The panel will convene shortly, but before we get to the panel, I'd like to introduce to you, if you don't know her yet, Dr. Beth Dunford, Vice President, Agriculture and Social Development Complex, African Development Bank. She's coming to make a few remarks. Let's give her a round of applause. Good luck.
Thank you very much, and Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to join you to really start the conversation about one of the bank's most transformational programs, which is helping millions of farmers, millions of African smallholder farmers adapt to or mitigate the impacts of climate change. So we know that many of the world's most climate vulnerable countries are in Africa, and that 65% of the world's remaining uncultivated arable land is also in Africa. So we can't talk about climate resilience or adaptation without talking about agriculture. So what Africa does in the face of climate change will determine the future of food for all of us. So food supply chain interruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and now by the war in Ukraine, really highlight how Africa needs to improve its capacity to produce more of its own nutritious food, to be less food import dependent, and to do all of this in a climate resilient way. So, as has already been mentioned by Dr. Jarvis, the African Development Bank's Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation initiative does just that. So it was started up only 3 years ago. This program that we like to call TAT provided 11 million farmers across 29 African countries with proven climate-adapted agricultural technologies. So this includes heat-tolerant wheat that you've heard a lot about this week, drought-tolerant maize varieties that allow farmers to grow grains where ordinary plants once struggled. So, for example, our TAT platform delivered heat-tolerant wheat varieties to 1.8 million farmers in 7 countries. We've heard a lot about the Ethiopia example, so thank you very much for bringing that up. And we've been able to increase wheat production by 2.7 million metric tons across the countries where TAT has been operating. To provide another example, TAT helped Sudan produce and plant 65,000 metric tons of certified heat-tolerant wheat seed, and these climate-adapted varieties helped Sudan double wheat production to 1.1 million tons and reach 50% sufficiency in wheat production. So right here in Ghana, we're working with national authorities and turning TAT pilot programs really into points of pride. So we've transformed more than 16,000 hectares of underutilized land into no-till maize and soy production fields. And Ghana's 2021 National Best Farmer Award winner, Alhaji Mashoud, is a TAT farmer. So, ladies and gentlemen, TAT is also getting international recognition. So a TAT documentary broadcast series, broadcast to heads of state and global leaders, recently won an International Business Awards first place Gold Stevie. So this is for digital campaigns. And so now, what's unusual here is that the judges are really looking past the video production to actually what is in the program. And one judge said, heads of state who watched would have been impressed, importantly, with the TAT program itself. Excellent initiative. Another judge wrote, these programs are just so necessary for positive change. So let's take a look at a short clip from the documentary series.
It's wheat harvest time in Ethiopia's Awash region. The yield is looking more promising than ever for farmers like Chaltu Kebede, using specialized wheat seed varieties more tolerant to the heat.
In the past, productivity of the land was very low due to the flooding of the river. But this year, I'm very excited about the wheat crop. I expect a yield of 4.5 to 5 tons per hectare.
Kebede's wheat crop is part of a 200,000 hectare of lowland irrigated wheat program that Ethiopia started with the support of the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Program, or TAT. Operating across 9 food commodities in more than 30 countries, TAT is helping Africa build back better.
So just this month, TAT received another honor, a Communicator Award of Distinction for Video Storytelling from the New York-based Academy of Interactive and Visual Arts. So we intend for TAT to produce more success stories, and we'll scale up TAT and our Mission 1 to 200 financing facility that aims to mobilize $1 billion to feed 200 million Africans by 2025. And your support and participation for our new 1.5 billion Africa Emergency Food Production Facility is absolutely critical right now to scale these technologies. So it will expand TAT to deliver climate-adapted seed varieties, fertilizer, and extension services to 20 million farmers and more. So to date, TAT has engaged with more than 300 public and private partners, as well as deployed 150 proven agricultural technologies for 9 commodities. So we really just call on your support for TAT as we work together to feed Africa, improve the quality of life for Africa, and to realize our vision for the continent as a breadbasket to the world. Thank you.
Very well done. Let's give another round of applause. Dr. Beth Dunford from the Africa Development Bank. Now we're going to start the conversations. The panel is coming up in a moment. I'd like to invite Sulai Iro, who is the Director General of Public Investment from Niger. Let's give him a round of applause as he makes his way. We'll also have Ms. Bjorg Sanche, who is the State Secretary, International Development, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she's from Norway. Please come up, yes. And also, the Honorable Eric Wafuho, who is the Chief Administrative Secretary, the National Treasury and Planning Ministry from the Republic of Kenya. Let's give him a round of applause as well. And I'd also like to invite Eric Meyer. Eric is the Deputy Assistant Secretary, Africa and the Middle East at the US Treasury. Let's give him a round of applause as he comes up as well. Are we good? I can't hear you though. Your response is not there. Are you okay? Good. I just want to make sure that the lunch wasn't too heavy because this is an important conversation. And to get us started, I'd like to start with you, sir. I'd like to hear from Niger. I'd like to hear about the 3 N's that the government has been pushing, making sure that Nigerians are fed. This is an interesting initiative because it also adopts agricultural technologies and has an element of natural resource management. Just tell me a little bit about the impact of that program on farmers in Nigeria.
Merci d'avoir donné cette occasion de partager avec vous une expérience très édifiante menée par mon pays, le Niger, en matière de résilience climatique pour la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle et le développement agricole durable. Comme vous le savez, le Niger est un pays sahélien dont l'agriculture et l'élevage constituent les principales activités de production et qui occupent plus de 80% de la population. Depuis les années 90, le pays faisait face à une exacerbation des phénomènes de changement climatique entraînant une année sur deux la sécheresse ou les inondations avec des pertes de production et d'importantes dégradations des sols et des moyens de substance. Pour faire face à cette situation, le gouvernement a adopté en 2012 la stratégie de l'initiative 3N, les Nigériens nourrissent les Nigériens, pour la sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle et le développement agricole durable, marquant un engagement politique fort pour la création des conditions optimales d'une production agro-silvopastorale et halieutique répondant aux besoins des populations du pays. L'initiative 3N se fonde sur les principaux atouts des pays pour un développement agricole et de l'élevage. En effet, le pays est doté de zones agroécologiques à haut potentiel pour les productions agro-silvopastorales et halieutiques, une forte diversité biologique naturelle et un important potentiel animal et halieutique, un immense potentiel hydrique, solaire et l'existence des filières aux avantages comparatifs réels. Donc, avec tous ces atouts, les principes directeurs d'intervention de l'initiative 3N constituent la concentration des actions et des appuis au niveau des communes, des villages et des exploitations familiales. La prise en compte du genre et de la jeunesse dans cette initiative et des groupes vulnérables dans toutes
I'm going to ask you to hold on for a second because you raise an important issue of the youth. And I know you have a speech there, and I don't want to interrupt your flow. But I'm really interested in hearing about how the youth in Kenya, for example, sir, are participating in building the resilience. Kenya is doing pretty well in developing technology. How is the government supporting these efforts by young people to make sure that they have the necessary funding to facilitate the development of these technologies? Let me, from Kenya, then I'll come back to you.
Okay. I hope I can be heard. Yes, I can tell. Allow me to give it context, because most of the engagements in agriculture space sometimes looks like it has dropped from the sky. And as government in Kenya, we have priorities in the agriculture sector, where we are convinced that agriculture must work for us. And so we have come up with what you could call the high five, the 5 key priorities that agriculture should serve. One of which is addressing the country's food security and helping us to achieve the SDG number 2 of zero hunger. So the zero hunger component is critical. And we carry along with this commitment all the ministries that operate under the whole of government approach. I have come here as a deputy minister within the Ministry of National Treasury and Planning or Finance. But you understand we are speaking about agriculture, and we are in sync with the Minister for Agriculture. That in Kenya, we must develop programs and projects that help us to feed our people. And that food insecurity is a crisis in many parts of the world, and the African leaders must ask themselves, what will it take for us to feed this continent?
And the way I understand it from what you've just said, everybody in the government is involved. All ministries,
everybody in government
all hands on deck.
Is involved in that. And so food security definitions also, we've taken the World Food Program definition that to have extension that deals with access, availability, it deals with the stability of the prices, and it deals with the nutritional issues, the quantities and the quality of the food that holistic component must be involved so that we don't suffer from hidden hunger, where our young people go to school and they chew sugarcane for lunch and they chew sugarcane for breakfast, and we think we are addressing food security issues. So first has been to engage in understanding of what does it mean, and engaging our think tanks. If you're looking at the second component, is that the think tanks that we do have, Kenya has more than 60 think tanks that help to generate innovations, knowledge systems that need to be integrated. And in this space of agriculture, we have the Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, KALIRO, which is also receiving funding from actually ADB and other programs to ensure that research is continuously being taking place to generate resilient seeds, climate-smart farming to be enhanced. The think tanks must be involved. But allow us to communicate to possibly the other government officers at the ministerial level, presidential level, that not only should African agriculture help to answer the need to deal with food security, but we must also ensure that agriculture is contributing to economic growth, poverty reduction, and job creation, especially for women and for the youth. And this is the space where the youth come in. So we don't bring in the youth simply because they are technologies, but we look at it from the perspective that it must contribute to the economic growth, it must contribute to poverty reduction, and it must contribute to job creation.
Let me unpack that a little bit more. Just take me back. When you say the youth, how are they involved in what you're trying to achieve?
So I'm giving you the background so that the how should and must change in the way it is done. So the component where youth come in that is critical is appreciating the fact that when you look at land as a factor of production, the youth in Kenya don't own land. And so when you lengthen the agricultural value chains to begin to include other aspects of agriculture, then young people come in, one of which is technology. The youth are able now to move into technology components, come up with technologies such as hydroponics, and come up with technologies such as drones that are able, for example, to apply fertilizer, fertilizer and top dressing and other components very well. In some areas, young people have come up with programs like computer applications, like Mkulima for G, which is a computer application that young people use to enable them to input geographical location. They know the type of soil, they know the acreage, they know the kind of crop, they know the rainfall season, and they're able to create projections into pricing and give you options of what you can grow. So the area of technology has become a very useful space for the young people to come. And also, we as a country, we are moving away from the land ownership as a focus, because most of Africa has food shortage through what we believe as a land tenure system that needs to be examined. Moving from land ownership conversations to land utilization allows the young people to move into new hinterlands that were hitherto considered as ASAL areas.
Yeah, that's really interesting, sir. And you make an interesting point, but because of time, I'm pushed to ask you, where is the money coming from?
Well,
because everything at the moment is an emergency.
Yes, but as government, we believe that African governments must take responsibility. They must take responsibility.
So where is the money coming from?
I am the Minister of Finance, and we generate resources through revenue collection. As a primary charge within agriculture, we are making a commitment to ensure that African governments, when they consider this area of agriculture as primary, they must put money on the table and then partner strategically in keeping with the SDG number 17 of partnerships, that partnerships must be in the context of accountability.
Okay, and again, thank God you've identified yourself as the Minister for Finance, so you're primed to answer this question. How much of your basket are you assigning to agriculture at the moment?
Well, we have percentages, and we are also, I have some very radical things that I was going to say.
Yeah.
One of which was to say that I think Africa's silo approach to development and silo approach to understanding agriculture could possibly be one of the hindrances, because agriculture needs the health systems in order to function. Agriculture needs infrastructure in order for her to function. Agriculture needs water interventions in order for her to function, and agriculture needs ICT and many other areas. So we need to create new paradigms and new approaches of conversing around African issues away from this silo that will then say how much has been allocated to agriculture.
I'll come back to you about markets and market access, because I'm sure that's an important element in this conversation. But I'm going to ask, you're nodding the whole time you're speaking. What's so attractive about the things he's saying? Because you've been nodding throughout, agreeing with almost everything that he's saying.
No, thank you. I think, the past few days have shown us the challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. So my nodding was really about, all these homegrown solutions to the huge challenges in front of us.
Now, talk to me about the money. When you hear things about what Kenya is trying to do, and how attracted are you to investing in Kenya's dreams, in Kenya's ambitions, in Niger's ambitions, in what you had from Ethiopia as well? Yes?
Sorry.
No, right. Are we having a problem with the microphone? If so, could you fix it, please?
It's hard to hear.
Right. I'm just wondering, when you hear what he's saying about Kenya, when you hear what we had about Ethiopia, and when you hear what's happening in Niger, as someone who potentially could invest in these ambitions, what is going to attract you to them? And what are you doing at the moment?
It's a very good question. I was reflecting, if you allow me, just on a history of collaboration between Norway and various countries on this continent. So as a child, I moved to Zambia because my father, an agronomist, was sent to Zambia through NORAD to work as a land use planning officer in the provincial administration in the Eastern Province. Zambia at that time was 15 years old, it was 15 years after independence, did not educate its own or her own professional people. Obviously, the way that we partner now is completely different because things have changed. A country like Zambia doesn't need Norway to send agronomists, but we have good partnerships through institutions like the African Development Bank, where we can support efficient, effective, proven solutions to increasing food security. And when we see the numbers of people going to bed hungry every night increasing, that's the huge challenge in front of us. Those are the kinds of partners and solutions that we are looking for.
So you talk about the requirements. Just go back a little bit and tell us a bit more about what each of those things mean. In terms of countries getting ready, preparing themselves to get into a potential partnership with you. Again, what do they need to have in place for you to be attracted to those countries?
Countries need to have in place good plans. We need to be able to see the vision. We heard from Ethiopia, for example, that Ethiopia can say that we have good plans, we have proven solutions, come invest here and we can make sure that we achieve the results that we want to achieve together in terms of food security. So good plans, good expertise, that research and knowledge-based approach to what we're trying to achieve.
Right, and with institutions like the African Development Bank, tell me a little bit more about what that partnership has been able to achieve and how you see it, how you can actually scale so that you hopefully bring in more money for the plans that are obviously quite huge.
Yes, no, African Development Bank is a very important partner for us. I think we've heard over the last couple of days also some of the very, very good approaches, how the bank has been able to also turn around quickly to respond to crisis, the COVID crisis, and now as well the food security crisis. We were very pleased to be able to support the African Emergency Food Plan. And these kinds of open, good discussions about where are the challenges and how we best can invest to meet them. For example, the TAP program, which I think has been quite impressive, and we heard the results from Ethiopia.
Right. And moving forward, I just want to come back to Kenya a little bit. Regional corporations, East African community, how are you working with countries within your regions in order to achieve these strategic objectives?
Thank you. The East African community, we celebrate the fact that DRC has joined and it keeps getting bigger. The ability to provide logistical support, and Kenya hopes to be the hub in logistics and financial services. We celebrate the fact that the partnership with the Africa Development Bank is helping us to build some infrastructure that will provide avenues through which we engage with Ethiopia, through which we engage with Uganda. Uganda, as a development partner with Kenya, gives us the greatest amount of business. And so Uganda is very special. And so part of it is the infrastructure partnership that has created such infrastructure as LAPSET, such infrastructure as SGR, and a move towards a common market that helps to then free up the movement of goods and services. We have now introduced the one-stop border post that allows higher velocity in the movement of goods and services. And Kenya has come up with a one single window system that takes all the processes and documentation within government that used to take about 6 months to participate in import and export trade. Now it takes 3 hours. That system, we've been able to take it before Parliament, and Parliament is in the process of passing it, right, which will allow doing business with Kenya as a press-the-button approach. So we're integrating technology in the process, and we hope there's conversation going on, side conversation here, in terms of what we can do with World Bank and what we have done with the Africa Development Bank. It has done significant amount of work in the area of smart agriculture and in the area of irrigation, helping us to shift from rain-fed agriculture into irrigation and helping us to access resilient seeds that are climate smart. And so that conversation is going on at the leadership level. And now we are advocating for people-to-people conversations that come a notch lower and very strategic, that allows the people in the Eastern Africa region to have people-to-people conversations that deal with culture, that then help us to do food system strategies in a better way. Because producing food, but what kind? And when you look at what some communities describe as hunger, is what others describe as a full stomach. And so culture components of food security must be brought on board. Yeah. And this helps the conversation that's going on within the Eastern African region.
Right, and sitting patiently and listening to all this is Eric Meyer from the US Treasury. And Eric, I'm really curious about what the United States plan is moving forward in as far as, making a few resources available to support these huge ambitions around agriculture on the continent.
No, well, thank you. And I think we really owe a thanks to the African Development Bank for organizing this really important, timely session. And I think, food insecurity, boosting agriculture in Africa has been a challenge for a long time. This isn't new. But I think the timing now is really, really important. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we have seen an exacerbation and a sharp increase in both acute and chronic food insecurity. This has been driven by conflict, climate change, as we heard earlier, economic downturns, including those associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's really critical that we respond in a cohesive and collective manner. And for that reason, the United States is taking real concrete steps to bring together the international community around a plan. And that's calling on our international partners to act, and to act now. And just last week, we were really pleased to welcome the International Financial Institution Action Plan to address food insecurity. This is a joint effort among the international financial institutions, including the African Development Bank, that details how they will step up, surge, and scale their response to the current crisis while coordinating for maximum impact. And I think when we look at the key elements of this plan, we'll see that there's a lot that meshes very closely with what my fellow panelists have been describing as the on-the-ground actions. So this plan includes, first, protecting vulnerable populations and people. It includes promoting open trade. It has a key element of invigorating fertilizer or addressing fertilizer shortages, which is key to boosting yields and production. And it has a key element around supporting food production now. And here I think we need to recognize the leadership of the African Development Bank in their $1.5 billion program on emergency food production that was just approved last week, weeks after this crisis began. And finally, the IFI action plan includes a key element on investing in climate resilient agriculture. And we've heard about the dire impacts of climate on food production in Africa. And so I would posit that this is a means of bringing together all of the key partners to work together on a holistic basis to try and address the drivers of the current crisis, to deal with the emergency needs now, but also to build in that medium and longer term response. And we're looking forward to continuing to work bilaterally, but with our partners in the international financial institutions.
Right, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much for that. And coming back to Niger, I'm wondering, Mr. Iro, what the challenges your country faces now in trying to attain your ambitions are. What specific challenges are you struggling with as a country?
Les défis, comme vous l'avez souligné, il y en a énormément. C'est des pays sahéliens qui sont face à de multiples crises, notamment ce qu'on avait dit, la crise alimentaire, les sécheresses et autres. Tout cela appelle à faire des efforts importants pour mobiliser des ressources d'abord au niveau national, pour financer avec les choix prioritaires des investissements qu'il faut réaliser dans la production, la sécurité alimentaire, mais aussi pour faire en sorte qu'il y ait beaucoup de technologies appropriées à la disposition des petits producteurs pour pouvoir améliorer la production et renforcer leur résilience. Il y en a également dans ce sens la disponibilité des engrais et des semences améliorées pour renforcer cette production. Parce que jusqu'ici, comme je l'ai souligné, la sécurité alimentaire est une priorité des priorités. Il faut que les gens soient vraiment bien nourris et pour qu'ils puissent s'adonner à la production et intensifier cette production et aller à la transformation. Vous avez évoqué dans ce sens l'utilisation, l'accès, l'occupation des jeunes, parce qu'il faut créer des opportunités pour les jeunes. Et nous avons pensé que l'agriculture est une occasion, en tout cas c'est un secteur porteur permettant de pouvoir créer des opportunités aux jeunes pour qu'ils puissent s'adonner dans ce secteur et développer les productions avec les technologies qui sont appropriées et qui sont portées qui sont mises à leur portée. Voilà un peu les principaux défis pour nous et comment nous pensons pouvoir y faire face. Merci.
Let's give him a round of applause. And at this point, I'd like to invite Cheryl Aben. Is Cheryl Aben here? Yes, Cheryl Aben. Let's give her a round of applause. She's seated over there. Could we get a microphone to her if she doesn't have one? Would you like to stay there? Or please come. You can come and stand here. Cheryl Aben is from Canada, and she's the Director General for Economic Development, Global Affairs, and really good to have you here. And I'm just wondering, what are you doing on the continent at the moment, and as far as supporting the ambitions of the African countries are concerned? What are you doing at the moment? How are you involved?
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for asking me this question, especially on this day. I really appreciate getting this question on this day because Canada, first of all, let me start by saying that food security is really front of mind for the government of Canada right now. We look around the world, we see what's happening. It's consuming us. And not only that, but specifically in Africa, because in our ministry, we have a commitment that we will have a focus on Africa. There's lots of ways that we do that, and there's lots of channels that we use when it comes to assistance and when it comes to agriculture. And the most common form is through our embassies and through our programs, our country programs, where we provide bilateral assistance. What I'm really excited about is that our minister yesterday was in Eastern Africa and made an announcement that Canada, after working really, really hard to make this happen, has made an announcement of $100 million partnering with the African Development Bank in order to support agri-SMEs in Africa. And we are pumped. So there's a lot of hope for this, because I think that working with organizations like the African Development Bank is a really, really critical tool for us. And now is the tough job of implementation, but we're committed, and we hope that we can make real progress. So thank you guys very much. I was really happy to be able to share that with you. Good.
So does this mean that it's going to be a long-term sustainable relationship, and $100 million could one day be 200 and maybe more?
I knew I was going to get that question. How did I know? You know, this is one thing I really like about this program is that our government is trying to be more innovative in the way that we approach providing development assistance, and we're using one of our innovative programs in order to partner for this. This is not the end of our innovative programming. So this is us. We're in a journey. We are learning, and I think that we're getting better and better learning as a country about how to partner and do things in a new and different way, bringing in additional partners in order to have more impact. So I would just say stay tuned, and hopefully you can watch us learn and make progress and even improve in the future. And I hope that our initiatives in the future are actually going to be, you know, maybe slightly different, but this is not the end. This is only the beginning for us.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much to Ms. Cheryl Urban. And is there anybody at all in the audience that would like to say anything, that has had something interesting, would like to ask a question? Anybody in the audience? Because if you don't put up your hand, I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. I'll ask you to ask a question because you're paying very good attention to what's going on. And I'm particularly interested in someone who's able to comment on the things that women are doing in order to ensure, because wherever I've traveled across Africa, women hold this continent down. Women make sure that we are fed. Women are the ones at the center of this battle. Anybody that's working with women, just brace yourself, because I'm coming, because I'd like to hear about the experience of African women across the continent. And this is something that I want to bring you in, Mr. Afuho. I've been to your village. I've been to Isuha. I've been to all these parts of Western Kenya, and seen that women are playing a critical role in ensuring that these ideas that we're discussing here are not only achieved, but also sustained. Tell me a little bit more about what work is going into that.
Thank you. In fact, I thought you would see it as a challenge that we do have as a country, and possibly as a continent, that women are on the forefront of agricultural production, but they are not on the forefront of decision-making around how those resources are shared. And so part of it is for us as Africa, then Kenya, to look at governance, architecture, and design that helps to bring them to the decision table in how resources are allocated. They continue to be the main contributor to the workforce, labor force, within agriculture sector, but it is not seen to be commensurate with what they earn out of that process. And so part of the ongoing work is to see how women can be brought to the center of decision-making around even agricultural systems, how they participate in the area, especially of access to water and other facilities. So I think, as you said, you've gone to the village, you have seen it's a highly male-dominated environment, and the women remain simply as farm hands to work, but the men continue to earn the resources.
Right, and that's an important point to assert, because that obviously needs to change. And I wonder, Madame Sanche, you've been nodding and you seem to agree. with this again. What are you saying about funding projects around that concentrate on women? Tell me a little bit about the thinking from potential partners like yourselves around projects that are indeed driven and anchored by women.
No, thank you for that question. I'm nodding. I think there's great convergence here on stage. You know, it's a paradox that among those who are food insecure on this continent are food producers, smallholder farmers that go to bed hungry a few months of the year. This is one of, something that we really need to address, something we need to work on. So that focus on smallholder farmers, many of whom are women, is really key for us to move forward. Also, Russia's attack on Ukraine, I think, has really spotlighted the vulnerabilities of the current food value chains, where we send wheat around the world. Now, why should Africa import food to the extent of $50 billion a year? Africa should be self-sufficient and export. And that's a big goal for us as well. I believe if we go down to support the smallholder farmers, many of whom are women, we support the local value chains, everything from input factors. We talked about fertilizer. Fertilizer can be produced locally. I've actually visited a fertilizer production plant here at the Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Accra this morning. Very impressive, part of circular economy. So now that links into how we can, within the agricultural sector, address what we need to do within climate, to address the climate crisis as well. And then all the way through production, minimizing food loss, access to markets, getting those local value chains going, and reducing the reliance on global value chains, which are, I think, increasingly under pressure.
Let's give a round of applause. That's really brilliant. And Eric, I really want to hear about the thinking around climate change. Even if Africa doubled its current emissions, they would still be under 1%. And I'm not trying to make your life difficult. You just turned out to be the guy from Treasury here. I'm just wondering whether it's understood in places like Washington, D.C. and Oslo and the places that actually have money, that there is a need to do more for African countries, African economies to be much more resilient to the obvious changes that are happening to the climate.
Yeah, look, I think the answer is yes. It is well understood. I think we heard earlier a very clear explanation of the impact of climate change, and we all know that climate change has a devastating impact on Africa. And on Africa, it hits the most vulnerable communities the hardest. And those most vulnerable communities are often in rural areas. They're often these smallholder agricultural producers that we're sitting up here talking about how you support. And so that makes it critically important that the investments and the response are around climate resilient agriculture with a focus on adaptation. And I think, here we can look at the work of the African Development Fund, which has an emphasis on the quality infrastructure around agriculture, on regional integration, which gets to some of these points that our Kenyan colleagues were talking about earlier, and on adaptation. And, the African Development Fund is a highly relevant tool for supporting these kinds of investments. And it's really important as we look forward to the replenishment of the African Development Fund, its 16th replenishment this year, that we have that continued support in this area. Let me highlight one other area, and my Canadian colleague being here is really quite important. We have another mechanism which really focuses on supporting the most vulnerable in this space, and that is the Global Agricultural and Food Security Program. We call it GAFSP for short, which is a mouthful, I know. But the United States and Canada are co-chairing GAFSP this year, and GAFSP, for those who don't know, it channels funding through the multilateral development banks, including the African Development Bank, and it channels it to the poorest countries where it is most needed. As of the end of 2020, over 60% of GAFSP's funding had been allocated to sub-Saharan Africa, where we know there are communities, projects, and people who are most in need. And GAFSP is focusing on that climate impact piece that you were referencing. In fact, 2/3 of GAFSP's current portfolio has climate co-benefits, mostly focused on adaptation. And last year, the United States and other donors called on GAFSP to do even more because we recognize the importance of this challenge. And GAFSP will systematically, going forward, incorporate climate considerations into its operations. So I think there's a clear element here of understanding the need to factor this into the work.
Right, so there is a need to understand that, and hopefully there'll be more money coming in and supporting the work that's going on. I just want you to also pick up on that question, Björk, and just tell me what your feeling is as far as partners understanding the urgency. As a journalist, when I cover these stories, honestly, I get frustrated because it just seems like nobody is paying as much attention to Africa as they should. What are you seeing from your vantage point?
Well, if I may be so bold, if there's one good thing that has come out of the current crisis on the European continent, I think it is to really highlight the urgency of what we're talking about today and really increasing food security around the world, including on the African continent. There's almost a kind of solidarity because food prices, fuel prices and so on are increasing everywhere. And the understanding that on a continent where this can push people into poverty, there is a link, there is a recognition, and an increased understanding of the urgency of this. And that has led to, for example, on the part of Norway, we have increased our support for food security and for agricultural production quite massively over the last couple of years. And we've been able to increase again, faced with now the consequences of the Russian invasion in Ukraine and the increased food prices as a result of that. So that feeling of urgency, I think, is upon all of us right now. And it means that it's a good time to act.
Right, and from where you sit, Mheshimiwa Wafuho, sitting next to partners who have money, you're the man in charge of the treasury. What sort of question would you have for them? What are you asking them? I'm not asking you to beg, obviously, but it's what are you asking development partners? What sort of support do you need as a country? And when you speak to your peers across the continent, how widely spread is that need?
Thank you for the question. It's a conversation that we've been having with our partners, development partners. One of the areas is to align the country's strategy plans and programs with the country's priorities. And we are glad that already a framework exists to ensure that that support that comes is played in the space that addresses the priorities of that particular country, but also benefits from the vision and observation of the partners. It's a partnership. It's a two-way process that requires honesty and integrity. We also, the issues of governance, which they place on the nations that are partnering, that there must be a sense of transparency and value for money in how these resources come in a space, so that we do not reward mediocrity and punish performance, but that we come into that space in a manner that says, yes, we are committed to no one being left behind, but we must hold you accountable on some templates. As far as the conversation with Kenya is going, you asked the challenges, what the challenges are. I think one of the areas is a shift away from the rain-fed agriculture into irrigation, and the need to make sure that water solutions are helping us to achieve what water and sanitation programs intend to have, so that we go beyond domestic use, we go beyond irrigation, we go beyond navigation, we go to recreation and power generation from within the water as an ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I just want to invite back Dr. Jarvis and ask him a question, if you may. I'm really interested in what African countries, based on where you sit, can do better. What is it that is missing and what needs to be done better? Let's give him a round of applause. He didn't expect this question.
You really have to be on your toes in this session, don't you? No one can sleep, you know, you'll be next. So, I mean, I think one of the things is aligning agendas. At least in the climate world, we've been working a lot on working with negotiators in the climate agreement, and you need ministries and departments to work together, and that's when the magic happens. One of the biggest successes that we've had in CGIR of working on climate adaptation has been on climate services in Senegal, and it's getting climate information to farmers. And the magic happened when you get the Department of Agriculture talking to the Met Office, and those two working hand in hand. And so it's a lot about intergovernmental collaboration, not seeing it as competing agendas, but seeing it as synergies and building off of those.
Right. And tell me a little bit more about that particular project and where else, which other success stories you'd want to share with us about what is working across the continent. What else have you seen that's working?
Oh, I mean, I've seen there's absolutely incredible things happening right now in the digital space of services. I mean, I'm British, but I live in Latin America. And I can tell you, I mean, the revolution that's going on right now with digital services, mobile phone-based extension systems, the innovation hub in Kenya, I love in Nairobi, going to the iHub. I mean, it's the energy of youth in that is absolutely fantastic. And so that is a success story for me. And you've got to be looking as well, I mean, as governments, how can you spur that on? How can you build that, accelerate it, incubate these kinds of companies and get them going?
Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. So what we've learned from this particular session is that there is a willingness from the partners to do more. We've also learned that young people from Niger are doing a lot of impressive work and are being co-opted. We've also heard about what women are doing, and we have accepted that without the women, this idea is not going to go very far. And then also the collaboration between different government departments is key in ensuring sustainability, but also the achievement of those set goals. I'd like you to give my panel a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. They have done exceptionally well, and I wish to thank them very much for making their time to share their insights with us. In a few moments, we will be, oh, thank you very much, sorry. I should be excusing them. Thank you very much. Let's give them another round of applause. We had here Mr. Sulaye Iro, Director General Public Investment, and he's from Niger. We also had Ms. Bjorg Sancha, who is the State Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Norway, and we had the Honorable Eric Wafuho, who is the Chief Administrative Secretary, National Treasury and Planning from the Republic of Kenya, and Eric Meyer, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Africa and the Middle East of the U.S. Treasury. Round of applause to them. At this point, I'd like to invite Martin. Is Martin here? Martin Frugin? Yeah. Yep. Martin is coming up to make a few final remarks. Let's give him a round of applause. He's the Director for Agriculture and Agro-Industry at the African Development Bank.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alan. And ladies and gentlemen, you all agree with me that it's been a pretty intense and a pretty informative discussion. There were 5 clear messages, very, very clear. The number 1 was from Andy. There is a problem, yeah? And as we heard from Andy again and from the Minister of State of Ethiopia, there are solutions. And thirdly, as we also saw from Ethiopia and also saw from other places, we need to scale those solutions to as many farmers as possible. And fourthly, if we scale those solutions, Africa has no business importing food, as we heard from the statements of Norway, Shanska. We don't have to import $50 billion worth of food. We can actually produce enough and even export. And the last thing we had, the sense of urgency. Exogenous shocks, like the one we're experiencing now from Ukraine, is showing the folly of, allowing other people to control your source of food. So just to expand a little bit on those 5 points. First of all, the climate change crisis is here with us. Nobody can deny that. So we do have a problem. We also have, it's also true that Africa is hardest hit. The most droughts, the most floods, the most high air and soil temperatures are here on the continent. And also livelihoods have been devastated by all that. Agriculture in Africa is not competitive. That's why we import cheap food from Ukraine. That's the result of the climate change. That's the result of the non-competitive agricultural sector that we have today. And this all ends up in people abandoning the rural areas. This all ends up in importing more and more food. But there's a solution, and as we saw, in what's happening in Ethiopia. In 2018-2019 wheat season, it's the winter season in Ethiopia. Irrigated wheat was only accounted for 5,000 hectares. You heard the Minister of State say today, it's now 600,000 hectares. The solution was heat-tolerant wheat varieties. VP Beth and I were in Ethiopia earlier this year in February. We met farmers who used to grow vegetables tell us that it was so much profitable to grow the heat-tolerant wheat varieties. So there's a solution, no doubt about that. The solution is also, as Andy said, improve practices that help to recover degraded land, conservation agriculture, returning the residues as we had from Kalamasha, helping the soils. The soil is alive. The soil is a living entity. It's actually teeming with billions of little microorganisms, but they all need organic matter to survive and thrive. That organic matter cannot be burnt at the end of the season. It has to be brought back. So the solutions need to be scaled to as many farmers as possible. We also heard about infrastructure, small-scale irrigation that help farmers